Good morning and welcome to a special double installment of the Avoid Vaping Fast Facts Webinar. Today, Kristen Holt, President and CEO of KDH will be leading our discussion around two topics. First, flavors and vapes, and second, tobacco industry tactics. So before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that if you missed our first 5 webinar installments, you can still access a full recording of them on our YouTube channel, KDH Research. I would also like to direct your attention to your viewing pane, where there's a section called Questions. If you have any questions as you are listening to the webinar that you would like me to ask Kristen at the end, please type them into that section. I will be moderating those questions when Kristen concludes both topics. And with that, Kristen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Maria, and welcome everybody who's here to listen to our next installment of the Avoid Anti-Vaping Online Information Dissemination Webinar. Today we're actually going to cover 2 topics that are related to one another. We're going to talk first about flavors and their role in e-cigarette usage rates, and also tobacco industry tactics that are used to promote vaping to youth. So I'll begin with what is a familiar slide to everybody who has participated in any of these webinars before. These are the most recent statistics on vaping, and we know that in 2018 more than 3.5 million middle and high schoolers were current users of e-cigarettes, and that electronic cigarettes, or vapes more commonly called, were the most commonly used tobacco product among both middle and high school students. You'll see usage rates are indeed higher in high school than in middle school. And that translates to about 1 in 5 high school kids and 1 in 20 middle school kids currently using e-cigarettes. So what I want to talk today is about how flavors relate to e-cigarette use. So it's interesting, we did focus groups for a client back in January 2018, and kids were readily able to say that flavors played an important role in their enjoyment of vapes, but they didn't see the connection between starting to vape and flavors. And when we went back and did some focus groups more recently, as the lines are starting to be connected, the dots are starting to be more apparent between how flavors relate to vape use and persisting use of vapes. So we know that flavors attract kids, and they do so in a number of different ways. First of all, the industry uses flavors to attract kids to the product. That's been well documented, both when we're looking at combustible cigarettes and the history there, but also with vapes. But flavors also make use easier, so they decrease physical barriers, some of the physical consequences of using or inhaling a foreign substance. So there's a lot of research that I'll talk about in a little bit about menthol cigarettes. Menthol cigarettes were one of the kind of original and most well-studied flavored tobacco products, and the addition of menthol to the cigarette actually makes it easier to inhale, decreases coughing, and changes the user experience so that using the product's easier. And that's certainly true with the flavors that are in vapes as well. By making use easier, it increases the likelihood that the kid will come back to it. Flavors also increase perceptions of safety. You can look at the pictures on the right, which are really meant to illustrate that the industry is using deceptive marketing techniques to try to equate flavors with familiar products. So all of those show vape flavors, they all look like familiar things you've seen in the grocery store, particularly in the candy aisle. So these are familiar and attractive things to kids. You just have to think back to Sunday and Saturday morning cartoons. And they look very innocuous and very approachable and very friendly. They certainly don't look like the dangerous products they are. So a more attractive presentation, emphasizing the flavors of the product, can change the form of the product and make it more acceptable to use. And the most recent research I found is that there's about 15,000 flavors on the market and counting. And it's important to remember when we talk about this that flavors really are in 2 forms almost. There's products that come with flavors. So if you think about the pod-based vapes like Juul or Alto, those come in flavors, but there's also flavored e-juice that can be used in customizable products or even used, quote unquote, to hack existing products. Now, we also know that flavors hook kids, and that statement's not mine. I borrowed that for sure from a couple very powerful campaigns, state-based campaigns, that are calling for the eradication of flavored products because of how they hook kids on vaping products. And the statistics here are very stark. So 81% of youth and 86% of young adults state that their first use of tobacco was with a flavored product. First use of flavored tobacco is associated with a higher prevalence of tobacco use. What that means is that kids who start with flavors are more likely to keep using that product. And 4 out of 5 kids who vape nicotine use flavors. So flavors really are everywhere, and they're very much linked to not only adoption of vaping and other cigarette, combustible use, but also the persistence of this behavior. So let's talk quickly about Juul. We all know Juul is one of the most prevalent, most popular types of vapes. And up until recently, when their market share has taken a tumble recently because of negative press and because of the vaping deaths. But up until recently, they controlled nearly 75% of the vaping market share. And it's just interesting to look how flavors have played a role in their timeline. So originally, when Juul was first released, the flavor offerings were pretty broad. So there was a tobacco, there's actually 2 kinds of tobacco, Virginia and traditional. There was mango cream, fruit, cucumber mint, and menthol. And mango and mint were about 75% of all their sales. So again, you can see the popularity of flavors really driving use. In mid-October, Juul announced that they would no longer sell fruit, mango, cream, or cucumber. And when they stopped selling these pods, mint sales soared. So consumers really flocked to the one remaining flavored product. And then just recently, a few days ago, it was announced on the 7th of November that Juul would stop selling mint, which is about 70% of its current sales. And so the question in everybody's mind, they're going to keep selling menthol and tobacco. The question is, what will happen to menthol sales? Will we see those same kind of increases, the movement of people from mango to mint? Will we see people moving from mint to menthol? And then we know that flavors harm people, and a lot of this research really comes from traditional combustible cigarettes. There's a long history of research on menthol cigarettes, which is the only flavored cigarette that's been allowed in the market for quite some time. And so the research base on this is really robust. I want to be very clear that we don't know yet how flavors affect health or what impact flavors have on vaping, but we can think about and kind of extrapolate out what we know about menthol cigarettes in relationship to the flavors in e-cigs. And so we know that menthol cigarettes are more addictive than traditional cigarettes. Some of this may be because smoking them is easier. I mentioned this before. It removes some of the physical barriers to smoking, so there's less respiratory irritation, less coughing. There's no evidence that menthol cigarettes are any safer than traditional cigarettes. They're equally as damaging to the body. And there's also some very strong evidence that menthol cigarettes are harder to quit than traditional cigarettes. There's also a long and well-documented history of menthol cigarettes being disproportionately marketed to African American communities. Right now, about 85% of Black smokers do use menthols, which is 3 times higher than white smokers. So knowing that they're more addictive and harder to quit, this really suggests a pretty substantial health disparity in relationship to traditional cigarettes, health consequences in these communities. And I want you to think about what these findings about menthol cigarettes suggest about the future impact of flavored vapes. Are there any predictions we can make based on this body of research? So let's just talk quickly about related policy, particularly as it touches on flavors. So the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, signed into law by Obama in 2009, prohibited the sale of most flavored cigarettes, but it did not extend to menthols, and it did not extend to non-cigarette tobacco products such as cigars, hookahs, and e-cigarettes. And so really that exemption, that exception in this act is why we're in the situation we are today, with the proliferation and the prevalence of flavored vapes. Just recently on September 11th, primarily in relationship to the many vaping deaths that were occurring with a new respiratory illness, the White House announced that the federal government plans to act to ban flavored e-cigarettes, including menthol flavored products. So this proclamation didn't give any specific tactics, but really does push to accelerate the timeline to remove flavored vapes and other flavored products out of the marketplace. But we know that states have also been taking initiative in this regard too. And so this table presents some of the steps that have been taken to curb the vaping epidemic and protect youth, really by addressing flavors specifically. So Michigan was one of the first states, and one of their restrictions against vaping was limiting the sale of vaping products in any flavor except tobacco. New York followed. Massachusetts currently has a temporary ban on sales of tobacco products, flavored or otherwise. Rhode Island and Washington have bans on flavored products. California, particularly San Francisco, has now banned the sale of all e-cigarettes. And more states are following this path. So you can see, just even in the month of October, there were 4 states that placed either temporary or emergency bans on flavored vapes. And so it really speaks volumes about the power of flavors in driving forward this epidemic, and the policy related changes that can be made around flavors to help prevent vaping. And so the question I throw out to you right now is, what comes next? So Juul has taken some steps to self-limit the products that it's selling with flavors, but you can see in that upper right corner there's a whole new industry of Juul-alikes that are they have similar packaging to Juul, similar flavors. So these are coming on the market very quickly. Do a quick search for how to refill your Juul pods or how to flavor your Juul pods. You'll be amazed by the number of tutorials that can show kids how to hack a Juul pod to add off-the-shelf mango flavoring, mango e-liquid that they can get from any vape shop. So I gave you a screenshot of just one that I found that shows how easy it is to pop that pod open and refill it with whatever flavor that you like. And then there's 2 alternative products on the left, which are not currently involved in any of these bans. So Velo is a new nicotine patch product. It does not have tobacco in it. It is nicotine only. But I'm sure you'll find it interesting in relationship to what I've talked about so far, that the 2 flavors it's offered in are citrus and mint. There's currently no research on the impact of these products, their health, but we do know that they have nicotine in them, and all of the caveats about the dangers of nicotine for developing brains for youth stand in place. And then you'll see little cigars. Swisher Sweets is one of the best known brands. These have long been on the radar of communities with large urban populations. They're very popular among African American and Hispanic youth. And right now, little cigars, cigarillos, are not included in any of the flavor bans, and you can see the wide variety of flavors that are available on the market in these products. So there is some concern in the prevention community that elimination of flavored vapes might cause kids to move to different unregulated products. So those are all considerations for you as prevention people to think about in your communities and what you might see coming next as a result of these changes in the environment.